Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rally Point. So this is our monthly series that brings veteran topics and programs and veterans themselves front and center here at the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. My name is Bill Butler. I'm the Chief of Staff. This month, we're diving into the topic of military transition, specifically navigating your journey, because it's an individual journey in many cases, minimizing all the white noise that is out there. There's so many organizations out there that are available to help veterans, military members as they transition. Some are awesome and some are not so good and some are in between. So, how do you navigate and minimize that white noise? And then creating meaningful connections that allow all of us to thrive in our next mission. And relationships are so important. You never want to burn a bridge, and you never know when a friendship or a comradeship or a battle brother, battle sister from previous assignments will be able to help you out in the transition or in your future mission. And we think you'll find this discussion helpful and inspiring. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, add your comments or questions as we go along, and then we'll circle back and provide answers to those questions. So to set the stage, today's topic is something that every military member will experience. Everybody becomes a veteran when you leave service. And everybody's journey is different. Everybody's got different experiences, different education, different deployment experience, different training certifications, those sorts of things. Those all are taken into account as we transition. There are commonalities and similarities, but no two transition stories are alike. Today, I'm joined by three great panel members, Rachael, Alex, and Marnie. Alex Calfee, Marine Corps veteran, and Rachael Jackson, Army veteran. They are with us representing two of our partnered organizations, Oplign and Rev Company. They're going to share their personal stories of transition and then what they're doing after service. And then Marnie Holder is here to talk about a new program related to transition, which is being launched by the NVMM called Veteran Concierge. Affiliated with that program, we are partnering and collaborating with companies, service organizations, programs, platforms, and some colleges and universities out there as well. So let's just jump right into it. We'll go with ladies first. So Rachael, tell us about yourself, your military service, what inspired you to join the Army, go to West Point, what you did in the Army, and then your transition. What did you do? How challenging was it? And how successful was it? And then your decision to launch and then lead the Rev Company.
Well, that's like 8 questions in one, Bill.
I was just thinking that.
I started writing notes and I ran out of room there. But
we'll take it bite by bite. So tell us why West Point and what you did in the Army.
I got it. Thank you so much for having me today. Actually, my military service was inspired by my mom calling the Army recruiter. So I was in high school, not making the best choices in life, and needed what now I look back on and realize was the discipline and the training and the things that the military teaches you. Needed that desperately in life. And so she called the Army recruiter. He convinced me, this was in 1997 when I enlisted. So this was before 9/11, but he convinced me that I would travel the world and get my education and just have a great life. And so I enlisted in the Army. My uncle, who was a Marine in Vietnam, he did not want me to join. And he made me promise that if I could find a way to be an officer, that I would do that. So in AIT, I met a friend who was applying to West Point. Said, that sounds cool. I'll do that too. Went through the command referral program, got accepted into the West Point prep school. And I like to tell everybody, just kind of slid in the back door there to West Point, but loved it. Very grateful for that opportunity. And it's been a huge blessing in my life, that's for sure. I graduated in 2003, so 9/11 did happen while we were there. While I was I think a sophomore or junior in the academy, and is the first semester of our junior year. And so things changed a whole lot at that point in time. And I decided that I wanted to be as hardcore as I possibly could be. A lot of my friends were going infantry and ranger. I decided to go aviation and ended up flying the Apache helicopter in the Army. So I was stationed the first Cav Division, Fort Hood, deployed in 2006 to Iraq. And at that point in time, actually began my transition story. It was not planned. It was not easy, and it was very traumatizing for me. But long story short, went to Iraq, started blacking out for no reason that they could find. It turns out they don't like pilots to do that. So I was sent back stateside and went through about a 9-month medical evaluation board process and found myself medically discharged at the end of that year. The process for me was very difficult. I think there weren't many resources at that time for transitioning soldiers and veterans getting out. I didn't know. We had a 1-day out processing event. I didn't know how to put Apache pilot on a resume. And I had no idea what my civilian story or my civilian value was going to be. And on top of that, I had a huge amount of guilt for not being able to do what I had been trained to do, and felt just, I went through an incredible period of pretty significant depression, isolation, loneliness, anxiety. Just trying to figure out, where's my place? Where's my story? Who are my people? Where do I belong? And I tell you all that because that plays into the story I'm in right now. By the grace of God, I actually ended up getting a phone call out of the blue from my physics professor at West Point. He said, "Hey, Rachel, I just got a call from SAIC looking for a junior officer getting out with a degree of physics and nuclear engineering." And he said, "I only know one." So that's how I got a job at SAIC. Fell in love with entrepreneurialism and kind of this idea of building business. Got married, had a kid, and went to the government and started building business with the government as a government employee. The software engineering directorate said, "Want to come work for us?" And I said, "Well, I'm never going to code a thing. I hate coding." And they said, "That's okay. We have enough coders. We need some leaders." And so I got a job there, and I was on my path to government stability, which can be great, but can be a little bit boring too, just being honest. Yeah. When my mom passed away in 2010, and at that point in time, everything that I had been through, the transition, the people, the soldiers that I had led, their stories, my story, the people I met at SAIC, the people I met in the government, and just the entire kind of situation that now I understand what we're supposed to address kind of came to a head. And I realized that I wanted to do something more meaningful, more impactful, because everybody I had met had some kind of story. Everybody I met needed to know that they were not alone, that there were resources for them, and that there was a purpose for whatever their story was that they were going through. And long story short, started to try to figure out how we could actually break through the noise and actually connect people to each other, to those resources, and to the opportunities for growth and impact. And that's what we do at Rev now. Rev works with leaders to help build meaningful connection. And we define meaningful connection as that sense that one is known, valued, cared about, supported, and part of something bigger than themselves. To develop meaningful connection in scalable and sustainable ways that lead to strategic and systemic positive impact. And we do that by working with leadership. We train them and teach them in meaningful connection. We do that with our platform called Rev. And that's really the force multiplier and the mission amplifier for meaningful connection. And then we also help them with services, storytelling and community building services. So I think I answered most of your questions and
Great.
Maybe a couple extra.
Great job. Yeah. Wow. What a inspirational story. And I can't imagine, I had the luxury of deciding when I retired, and everybody says you'll know when it's time, and that was the case for me. And it was time. I made the decision, but I knew what I was going to do next, and had set some conditions. So I can't imagine when you experience, it's almost like a traumatic separation. You're not planning it, and then suddenly it's thrust upon you. So I can't imagine how hard and anxiety producing that was.
And there's a lot of veterans who go through that. A lot of them. I've talked to countless over the years who have gone through this, and even if they voluntarily separate, like even if they leave after 5 years or whatever, there's a lot of guilt that people are feeling for not finishing the mission, or for not, being as hardcore as you think you should be. And so, yeah, it's a real thing. So it's good to talk about it and bring it out in the open and let other people know.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Alex, over to you. So you joined the Marine Corps. What inspired you to join the Marines? And then what did you do in the Marine Corps? And then tell us a little bit about your transition and what you're doing now.
Sure. First off, thank you very much. I love participating in this sort of thing and kind of telling the story. I was inspired to join the Marine Corps because I was always this kid that was running around in the woods, playing G.I. Joe and the rest of it. I'm sure a lot of infantry guys or combat arms types had that same sort of background or same sort of thought process. I come from a long line of military service, and I trace it way back. So it's always been a significant part of kind of who I was, and who my family were. So it was always there. It was always sort of, I guess, an expectation to a certain degree, not you have to go in or anything like that, but it was just something that was done. And so that was one of the things that drove me. Similar to Rachel's story, I had actually gone to high school, never encountered a recruiter. The school I went to didn't have recruiters roaming the halls like my kids' high school does now. And so I ended up going to college, not really, not really knocking it out of the park, so to speak, in school in the early 90s. And so I basically took it upon myself. I was like, I'm not doing the right thing here. I need to figure it out. So I enlisted. I enlisted in the Marine Corps. And actually, my very good friend from high school, who was a West Pointer at the time, he actually came to my swearing in in Cleveland over Thanksgiving, and then I shipped out and went to Paris Island in February the next year. So I spent 5 years served. This is all pre 9/11. So I actually got out in 2000. I started off as a tow gunner, 0352 tow gunner, and ended up going into the reconnaissance community. So I became a reconnaissance Marine, 0321, served there for 3 years, and did a deployment to Europe. Went to Kosovo, got to see all the fun aspects of the Balkans in March and April, and at that time, I had met my fiance, and we had basically kind of planned on nothing was going on. There was no reason really for me to stay in, aside from if I wanted to do it, I could have, and I was definitely interested. But at the same time, I was like, all right, I kind of think I've seen it. Just like Rachel said, I needed to get the crap kicked out of me for a little bit, get my head screwed on right, and so I decided to go get out and finish my degree. So my transition was I got off ship or returned from deployment, got off ship, out process, separated from the Marine Corps, moved, got married, and went to school, and enrolled or matriculated to the Ohio State University in 30 days. And that was a whirlwind experience. I remember going through TAP. I still remember the building that I went through, and I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. I had this big book that they handed us of like, this is an example of resumes, and I'm just like, oh my god, really? I was fortunate enough in my transition experience that my now wife, was a registered nurse, and so I had stability, economic, financial stability in that she had a job. I was in school. I was working part-time doing that sort of thing, but my focus was on school, finishing my undergrad. And then I ended up rolling right into the MBA program at Ohio State and finished that as well. But my experience at Ohio State, especially when I first showed up and in 2000, when I got there, again, pre 9/11, so all of the infrastructure that exists now did not exist then. But the Ohio State University's Veterans Service Department was on the 5th floor of Archer Hall in a small room, and it was one woman, Gina Lee, who I think is still working at Ohio State. And she did a great job as best with the facilities and resources that she had to make it work for the vets that were coming back to Ohio State. But now it's a completely different story. They have a whole floor. They have got a whole building basically that's dedicated to helping the military and transitioning service members come to the university, be recognized, and kind of join the community. So, but my transition was still, I recognize the feelings that Rachael mentioned. I feel the same things. I ended up getting into the world of government contracting. So when you say SAIC, it kind of makes me laugh a little bit. I worked at Battelle Memorial Institute here in Columbus initially, and then moved over to a small contractor, intelligence support contractor that jumped into this giant thing. So I got to see I basically got to be within that space and kind of stay in that military space for a very long time after I got out, which I enjoyed. I love the camaraderie of the military. I still love it. I still love talking to military folks, and just when you get us all in the room together and there are no cameras on, the stories come out, and it's a great experience, and it's something I value, and I think a lot of other veterans value, and I know they do, because when we have these conversations, when we're talking to companies, and it devolves into, oh yeah, I know that guy, or oh, remember this, or yeah, Balad, we did this, that sort of thing, and kind of everyone relaxes a little bit. Everyone has their stories. Everyone gets to tell them and enjoy the company of their fellow vets. So, that was my experience. What prompted me to kind of start down the path I am right now with Oplign, and it actually comes out of government contracting. I won't get into the nitty gritty here. I don't want to bore anyone's ears off, but the challenge of identifying qualified people to put on contracts, send overseas. That was really the genesis of Oplign. And so my partners and I, all vets, and all government contracting folks, we got together. We kind of developed this concept of how do you identify who's qualified? Like, what's the process? And we broke it down, really kind of detailed, in a very detailed fashion. Broke down the process, broke down what it means to be qualified, and then mapping all of that. And we built Oplign out of that process. So, veterans, transitioning military, those are folks that kind of first and foremost for us. But again, we're figuring out that, hey, this applies to everybody else as well. Veterans have the particular challenge of they have a lingo or a layer of jargon that is impenetrable to most people. And they themselves very often don't understand, because no one really had a real job before they joined the military very often. So they don't have any experience in the commercial world. So that translation, that language issue it's a huge one, and it's one that we address primarily right off the bat. And then there's a whole host of other things that go along with that. So that's my story in 5 minutes.
All right. Well, thanks, Alex. So we've covered our 2 veterans, and then their journey of transition and what they're doing now. So I'd like to shift over to Marnie Holder, one of our employees, one of our great teammates here at the National Veterans Memorial and Museum, and then have her tell her story and how she's affiliated with military, what she's been doing, and what she is currently doing here at the NVMM.
Thanks, Bill, and it's great to be here with my 2 awesome friends, and it's exciting to have them join us and hear their stories and let their stories just represent what I know is a larger part of the community out there. So I was not a member of the military in the normal way, whether I enlisted or was commissioned. But I joined the military community in a different route. I was married into it, and I didn't know what that meant at the time. And to be honest, it was one of those that I didn't really mentally prepare. There's no recruiter for being a military spouse. You don't get the whole, hey, here's what to expect. So coming into it, the best way for me to learn and understand the community environment I was entering was to become a government employee myself. So I joined as a Department of Army civilian shortly after I was married, and then didn't know it at the time, but became a seasoned transition. I would not consider myself an expert, but I was seasoned at transitioning. I had to reinvent myself 14 different times. I never knew what I was going to expect on the other end. It was quit one job, go through periods of unemployment, try to jockey myself into another government position. But thankfully, I was blessed to have a pretty awesome Army career as a civilian, 21 years. And over the course of that, I got a chance to just really learn about a lot of the programs and services that the military does offer. One of those was the Transition Assistance Program. And I was at the right place, right time, at the point where we were doing significant force reductions, and military transition became a national initiative, and veteran unemployment was at an all-time high. And it at the administration at that time, started to really take an interest in it and really elevate the conversation to where we were starting to educate and inform the nation on just the value of a veteran, the value that they bring into the workspace. So it gave an opportunity to start to build partnerships and collaboration between government and what was provided through TAP, and then what was happening on the outside. So in doing that at the headquarters IMCOM level, I had a chance to meet a lot of pretty significant service providers, employers, and others that were really committed to making this, fixing and resolving this problem of veteran unemployment. So from there, I left government service and decided to pursue a passion and figure out ways where I can help push this a little further. And I joined the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And so over the course of the following 5.5+ years, I had a chance to continue working with the military because I knew that world very well. And really be a champion and advocate for the veteran and military spouses out there who were seeking employment opportunities and just career paths after service, but then really helping the companies understand the values of what those military members bring to their workforce. So did that, and then now I get a chance to bring all of that to a point where we get to tell stories. And that I joined the museum back in February of this year, and the vision of the museum to be more than a museum under our president and CEO, Lieutenant General retired Mike Ferreter, is to do more about not only telling those stories of our veterans' success, but contributing to those stories and finding ways where we can harness and leverage everything that is happening out there to bring it together for a common good and a common goal to help them seek and pursue what their next career is, and then ultimately recruit the next generation all volunteer force and inspire the nation on just what service means. So all of that to be said is the new program that we're launching here is called our Veteran Concierge Program. While it doesn't say employment specifically, we are working with those companies, service organizations, programs and platforms that are a part of that space and helping solve the problem. And the two that are represented today, clearly it demonstrates what we're trying to achieve is showing how service, military service, leads into that continued service in other capacities, whether it's through the Rev platform and helping, create meaningful connections, educate and inspire the leadership within a lot of these national level companies and just in the workplace of how those meaningful connections can impact not only your bottom line, but just really impact the workforce and inspire your workforce at large. And then the Oplign platform, I have to say, it is one of those that I consider the easy button, and I use that often. It does wade through all the noise. It helps those individuals who are seeking employment opportunities, and Rachael and Alex talked about this. You don't know how to really package and define yourself. You don't know how to really pull together what your military experience is and articulate it in a way where others understand it. And the Oplign platform does just that, not only for the veterans that are seeking what jobs they qualify for, but for the companies that are trying to interpret what military experience is and how it fits in to meet their demand and their needs. So that's just a little teaser of what the museum is doing and how I got into this awesome position.
Okay, great. Rachel, you mentioned, you're in a government contract, a government world. It was comfortable in that it was predictable, and you knew what to expect to a degree. But then it sounds like you got bored, and then you talked about how you gained entrepreneurial experience, and then you have jumped right into becoming an entrepreneur yourself by founding Rev. So tell us just a little bit about that, being an entrepreneur, what you learned, how you're applying those lessons in Rev.
Yeah, so when I started trying to figure out where we are now, so I've been doing this for 12 years. And I think one of the biggest lessons you learn over time is that it takes an average of 10 years to be an overnight success. So I think for me, it was a very personal journey. Like it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go out, I'm going to start a business because I want to get rich and make money and all this kind of stuff. Like it was really personal about trying to help people like my mom, who had struggled with many things, to include depression, to include addiction, to include a lot of things until the day that she died. And knowing that a lot of people, my soldiers, their families, people that I was friends with, everybody, like that's all the stories were just so personal and wanting to connect people to this sense that there's hope and there's help and there's purpose, right? So for me, it was a very personal endeavor. I was like right now I'm a tech CEO, right? I was back then a government employee with a BlackBerry. And so my journey began by saying, oh, well, I'll start a blog, and realize there's 600 million blogs and they all say the same thing and nobody cared what I had to say. So I was like, well, that's not going to work, so I'm going to pivot, and I started a magazine because I was like, oh, well, a great business decision would be to do a print magazine. That's just something that everybody's going to want to buy, Of course, by the grace of God, we printed for 3 years. We got picked up by Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, but it wasn't making that strategic, systemic, scalable, and sustainable impact. But during that entire time, I kept looking for and kept researching, what is the big problem? What is our solution? How does our solution make sense? How can we communicate our solution? How can we implement our solution? And in learning how to research, pull conclusions, test conclusions, practice pitching, practice marketing, getting feedback, just trying to execute and learning how to pivot and be resilient. For me, it just quitting and failure has never been an option. This is my life call. So that's, I'm happy to go and talk about that with anybody. Just what it takes if you're super passionate about something, to figure out how to raise money. So, to date, we've raised almost $3 million, but then now I'm pivoting to this idea of like, well, I don't want to be venture funded. I don't want investors. I want to be, self-sustaining and stuff. So there's a lot of like evolutions that happen and just learning how to go with it and how to execute has been challenging and rewarding, I would say.
Okay. So Alex, same thing with you. You're working for the Battelle Foundation, a great organization, and they do incredibly impactful work. But then you have a similar experience where you identify a problem and you come up with a solution. So if you just kind of describe your thought process on, what made you think that there was a problem, and how did you think you could solve it or provide a solution for folks, and how's that going for you?
Yeah, it's Battelle was kind of my first real job, right out of the military. And then working for a small startup, also founded by Army vets, doing the contracting thing. We grew immensely. It was a tremendous success. And then I kind of wanted to do something different. I was like, well, I'd like to try being in the civilian market, the commercial, the real world, quote unquote. So I jumped over to DHL, worked in supply chain, strategy there for a while. And then ended up consulting. I wanted to get back into the government space, which is what I knew. Consulted for a few years, and then one of the things that we started talking about, my co-founders and I, was this concept of how do we figure out how to close the demand that these companies have, specifically the ones I was working with. How do we close that demand more quickly? And demand being the open jobs that they've got. And that really was the crux of it is, we kind of figured out that it's all about the demand. It's not about, understanding an individual resume or a group of resumes. It's actually understanding what the labor market demand side requires. That will drive everything else. And once we kind of got that, we crystallized that, a number of years ago, and then we built the company around that. And there's a lot of learning. It's very iterative. It's kind of like going through Amphib Recon School or BUDS or Ranger School without knowing you're in it. So you're wondering why everyone's yelling at you and telling you no, and why you don't get any sleep, and because you're going through this process of figuring it out in a real environment using real data, using real tools, and the market's telling you on a daily basis what it wants from you. It's just up to you to figure it out. And there's an easy way to stop doing it, and that's to quit. And as Rachel alluded to, it's very easy. And I've had people ask me, well, how did you get through whatever schools you went through? And so I was like, okay, it's easy. You just don't quit. If you don't quit and they don't throw you out at the end, you graduate. That's kind of how it works. So that's the process for us, just in the general sense. But yeah, from a technology standpoint, from a conceptual standpoint, it's really what we do. What we focus on is scale, speed, and precision. In everything we do. So it's not going to make sense if it doesn't operate at scale, because it's not going to impact a lot of people, and the data doesn't matter on kind of anecdotal basis. It's speed. Modern business, everything's about speed. How quickly can you do something and do it well, but how quickly can you get it done? Because everyone else is trying to do it too. Mm-hmm. And then precision. So getting the right thing done and doing it repeatedly is also very important. So that's kind of our approach, and that's what we're trying to tell people about, specifically about within the HR space, the talent acquisition space. How do you incorporate veterans into your strategy of talent acquisition? Most HR folks will just go, I don't know. I really don't know. I know that they're good, and right. I know that they provide some sort of value to my company. I just don't know how to understand that value, how to express it to other hiring managers or to my senior leadership, and then how do you get the veteran to talk in a way that makes sense to the business world? Like that's a part of the challenge as well. So our focus really is around that, making sure that there's common language. And then, once you figure out what that common language is, it's actually not that hard to explain to someone who's actually under a P&L pressure, right? A profit loss pressure. They see the value and they see it operate at speed, scale, and precision, and they're like, oh, okay, I like that. So, we like to say we're a map. We some of our early websites, and Rachel's, you were saying sort of the same thing about trying different things and iterating. Our early websites were very militaristic, but they're also like full of those old topographical maps with grid squares and a Lensatic M2 compass. And that's because we had to map the labor market and then become the compass to provide people guidance. And we don't know where you want to go. Only you know where you want to go. But if we've mapped it all, we can give you the coordinates wherever you'd like to go. So that's kind of the initial concept, and it's really kind of blown up from there. So,
Okay, well, hold that thought. So, question for each of you. Alex, you go first. Is there any one thing that kind of prepared you or set you up for success on becoming an entrepreneur? Either a course that you took, some experience that you had in the military, or some mentor that you met along the way?
There are people in my background that have all contributed, so I don't want to, I can't assign any individual one way or the other. There are books I've read and things like that that really kind of stick out in my mind. There's no courses. I mean, I took a number of courses at Ohio State. The MBA program really changed the way I thought about the world. I was not from a business background, and taking an MBA program, full time for 2 years like that really did impact me, and I'm very glad for that experience. From the military standpoint, I think I talked about before, not quitting. That's the most important thing, right? If you don't quit as an entrepreneur, you can continue being an entrepreneur. Now, there's certain times when you have to quit, or you have to pivot, or you have to maybe shut something down and start something else up because it's not working, because the market's telling you it's not working. But not quitting is vital. I mean, that's really the kind of the big thing. And then as you bring people on, this is the thing I always told when I had direct reports when I was working full time for other companies. It's all about commander's intent. And that's a military concept that almost everybody in the military is exposed to at some point. When you're writing a patrol order, that's the most important thing, right? Everything else of a patrol order doesn't matter if you don't know what the commander's intent is, because that allows you to solve problems as they come up that you didn't anticipate. But if you know what the commander wanted and what his or her commander wanted, then you can actually make adjustments on the fly that will still adhere to the mission, but might not be what you wrote down initially, right? So like a business plan, if you think of a business plan as a patrol order, the patrol order and business plan never survive first contact with the enemy. So you've got to be able to be adaptable, and then not quit while you're doing it. So that's really the two things for me. And I learned that across all of my experiences in the military, in the civilian world, in academics. That's it. Okay.
Rachel, what about you?
Yes, similar to Alex, I would say that the military sets you up with the warrior heart, right? And I think that ability to adapt and overcome, I think one of the things that I love the most about soldiers is their ability to innovate and just solve things, you're in the field and you got to make something work. You better figure it out. Nobody's coming to your rescue, so I think that innovation, that warrior heart, and those ethos are super important. The second thing I think was the decision to do a really hard degree. So I told my dad that I was going to major in history at West Point. And he said, you did not go to an engineering school to get a non-engineering degree. So that's why I chose physics and nuclear engineering, right? It's not because I was good at it, because I wasn't. But that's, essentially why I chose that degree. But in his wisdom, and I would say this to anybody, please go for a hard degree. If you're history and you want to do that, and history can be pretty daunting and hard too, but doing that degree showed and taught me how to learn and how to dig deep and how to push through really hard challenges. And so I think that those two things probably were fundamental, set me up for success. But that warrior heart, don't discount it. Now, along with that warrior heart, Alex alluded to this. Sometimes you can get a little bullheaded, a little hard-headed. Sometimes you can think you got the answers and you might not. And there's going to be some humbling experiences. And I think honestly, going through that really hard transition for me was incredibly humbling. And I'm a big believer. I have a really strong faith. And I just think that through that humbling, I became something useful. So when you're kind of full of yourself and kind of got that hua kind of, facade and, I think you become very useful when you have a significant humbling experience combined with that warrior heart. And so that's what I would say.
Yeah, don't become an entrepreneur if you don't like people saying no to you.
Yeah, right.
If you can't, if the third no makes you want to quit, don't. Yeah, the 300th no is going to kill you. So.
Yeah, that's
don't blame them for not understanding.
Yeah, somebody told me, I think I was a lieutenant or a captain, something to the effect of the moment you start believing all the words that are written on your officer evaluation report is the moment you become an ineffective leader.
Right.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of in line with what you just said, Rachel. Marnie, you've got, you said you wanted to highlight a couple things relative to what both Alex and Rachel said.
Yeah, and I'm happy that they're bringing up their story and they're being very raw and real in the way that they're sharing. And I do want to highlight this for any of those service members or veterans that are out there and military spouses too, or anyone that finds himself in a transition point. We all do, whether you're military affiliate or not. But a lot of the things that they learned in the service, or even what inspired them to join the service and what they learned, you heard this said, they're problem solvers, they're curious, they're lifelong learners, they're overcomers. They're failure, like they fail, and that's okay. In fact, fail fast and learn from it and move forward. And they say it in a way that motivates them to the next step. They're not saying it as it took them down and devastated them. Not to say that can happen, but they found a way to overcome it and pursue and be persistent through it, and let that be a part of their journey, part of their story, and help guide them to what was next. I think probably each one of them and any other veteran that's out there, that it's not a one size fits all. There's 18 million veterans plus. There's 18 million plus stories and journeys. So what Alex and Rachel are sharing are their stories, but they are not isolated in any way. That what they overcame and what they learned from their experiences is what we're inspiring others to do. I have seen a lot of times that service members are waiting for others to give them an answer on, okay, which path should I go, or I can do anything, what direction should I go? That decision can only be made by that individual. There's no one else that can tell them what direction to go. We want them to be inspired to pursue their personal journey. And so I just applaud Rachel and Alex and all the others out there who have overcome and really found and let their journey be navigated by their failures, but also by their successes and what they're passionate about and what's meaningful to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that strikes me is you cannot be a successful entrepreneur without a very supportive family. Rachel, Alex, you agree?
Yes. I don't think my wife would, if I told her everything that we have gone through over the past 5 years doing this, up front, she would have probably said, yeah, no, you're not doing that. That's great. So, but she did. She, as we went along, she believed in me. She supported it. She said, yep, I guess you can do that. Yep. Yep, I guess you can not have a paycheck for a long time, that sort of thing. So that's crucial. If you don't have that, if you have a spouse and the spouse isn't bought into what you're doing, you're probably not going to be very successful. And that's an important thing to recognize.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, being the wife in the situation, I never wanted to do anything that my husband wasn't fully supportive of and on board with. And I will give lots of credit to him for carrying a lot of the load, financial load, helping carry kid load, helping carry house load. There's when you're a mom of 2 kids, my kids are almost 12 and 11 now, there's a significant burden to carry, and you don't want to put business before family. I don't, and I don't want my kids to not know their mom or to have time, and so really it's been about me balancing that time and making sure, like sometimes in the entrepreneurial thing, it's like, go, 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 burn the candle all hours of the night. You're always traveling, you're always, meet all this kind of stuff. And I would strongly encourage, for those of you who have kids, families, weigh that, because in the long run, this doesn't matter as much as they do, and so putting it into proper perspective and balance in your life, the old school thinking of just going all, like even venture capitalists now are like, that's kind of red flag if you're like not ever making time for family and thriving. So all that to say, like lots of credit to my husband, and he's still carrying that financial burden, but we are getting there, so we're excited.
Okay, great. So before we're coming close to time, but before we finish and have Marnie close us out, if both of you could provide one piece of advice for somebody either getting ready to start their transition journey or getting ready to jump into the great unknown of becoming a veteran-owned small business and being entrepreneurial, what would that be? Rachel, you go first if you would.
Join Rev. It's about community. It really is. This is going to be a journey. There's going to be low points. There's going to be high points. Build a community, a support community. Help others and receive and accept help. So.
Okay. Alex, what about you?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd add that when I see entrepreneurs fail or startups fail, small businesses fail, and I've been doing this long enough to see all that happen. Understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and then how are you going to get paid for it? That applies to just going into a company, becoming an employee. If you're not understanding the value you're creating, you're not going to be able to explain it. You're not going to be able to sell it. You're not going to be able. You have to be able to explain the value that you're creating through the idea that you've developed, or the value that you create as an individual employee. So setting aside all the stuff we talked about earlier about not quitting and all the kind of high level stuff, the tactical knowledge of it's like being an infantryman. Know how to shoot, right? You got to know how to shoot to be an infantryman. Well, to be an entrepreneur, you have to know the value you create. And if you don't know that, if you can't explain it, stop, reassess, and figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So Marnie, let's talk about we've got 2 events coming up on the 9th of September. On Friday, we'll have our Patriot Day commemoration. So I would ask if you're in town and want to help us commemorate September 11th, come to the museum in the morning. And we've got a great lineup of speakers, elected officials, as well as our president and CEO, General Ferreter, to talk about 21 years ago, the most horrific terrorist attack in our country's history that then changed the course of our country for the next 20 years. And then many of us lived that with multiple deployments back and forth over to Iraq and Afghanistan and other places. So Marnie, on September 15th, September 16th, what do we have going on?
Yes, so taking into account this new veteran concierge that we're launching and working with these companies and platform, and highlighting those companies that have been not just veteran friendly, veteran ready, but veteran committed and hiring over the past many years, and those that are seeking veteran talent. We're taking all of that, packaging it up for a Veteran Employee Resource Group Summit. So we are bringing in those companies that we would consider more seasoned and experienced in the space and have really understood the value of veteran talent within their workforce and what they've done to really pull together that veteran talent, create affinity groups, and then help share that with the rest of their company. And then we have a lot of new companies that don't have access to that veteran talent pipeline yet, but are curious about it and want to learn more about not only the talent they have within the workforce, but then how then they can attract more. So we have a Veteran Employee Resource Group Summit on the 15th and 16th of September. If you are interested in that event, it is targeting those companies. So if you're part of a company that wants veteran talent or is looking to share your stories, best practices, lessons learned, we would love to have you join that event. And then also it's just helping those companies tell the stories of their veterans within their workforce. And Both Alex and Rachel are going to be at that event to go into more depth and detail of their platforms and what they offer as far as their programs and services. So not only will you get more of an opportunity to learn more about their programs, but they are also available, both of their websites, and we'll be able to put them up online here. If you're curious about their companies, we can certainly share those. But the event that's happening on the 15th and 16th, it will be here at the museum. We're excited to host at this venue, but it will also be something that we will continue to bring companies into the fold and help give them access to and help tell the stories of their veteran talent.
Okay, great. So a couple other programs I just want to highlight for folks who are either members of the museum or here in the Central Ohio area. We've got a resilience and wellness program. So we offer free classes for yoga. You can be a veteran, you can be a civilian, doesn't matter. Every Sunday at 9 o'clock at the museum, free yoga, taught by a great instructor, Jennifer Ballou. She's a retired Army Master Sergeant, Master Resilience Trainer, Gold Star spouse. So she brings a lot of her experience into the yoga classes, and they're very well done. And then also 5 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 6:30 a.m. we have free Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes, and then on Saturdays and Sunday, same thing at 9 o'clock, free Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And you can be a civilian, you can be a veteran, it doesn't matter. We welcome all skill levels. So check out our Resilience and Wellness program online. And then as we get further into the fall in November, on the 10th, we'll be offering a CrossFit workout in partnership with some of the local CrossFit gyms. We'll be doing it one of the Hero WODs, just to really honor veterans in service and sacrifice that they've made for our country and defending our freedoms. And then we've got a great Veterans Day ceremony on November 11th at 11 o'clock a.m. We'll be celebrating all veterans from all areas of service. We've got a great keynote speaker, Mr. David Kim. He's also a West Point graduate. He founded Children of Fallen Patriots, which is a wonderful organization that provides all post-high school education gaps that kids whose parents have been killed in the line of duty have, whether it's college, whether it's community college, associate's degree. Yeah, you want to become an electrician and get certified, then they can help meet that need. So super organization. Anyway, we got a lot of events coming up this fall and even more than I mentioned. So check out our events page on our main website. Thanks, Alex and Rachel, for what you do, continuing to serve and help those in need. You know, veterans are hardwired to serve others. I'm totally convinced of that. It's really hard to leave the military and not want to give back in some way, and you all prove that. And Marnie, you're doing the exact same thing.